Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on all things narcissism. So I am going to be talking about a phenomenon that those of you who are experiencing, or certainly who have experienced narcissistic abuse, really will understand. And it's about the exhaustion you experience because you're not able to talk openly about your experience of narcissistic abuse. I'd love to hear from you on this one. Have any of you ever been in a situation, it could have been family, it could have been a friend, it certainly could have been a partner or the workplace, where you felt like you couldn't even explain this to anyone? And so there was no outlet for you, and you almost felt exhausted because you almost had to sell this made up story about your relationship or your workplace, your family, because it was almost too much to explain. So that's what I'm going to take on here, which is this idea of how exhausting it is to not be able to tell the truth. So it's exhausting. It's exhausting to not be able to tell the truth about any situation. Lying actually requires energy. While it may be a subset of people out there who actually enjoy lying and being deceitful, for example, our narcissistic friends, families, and coworkers, most of us find it exhausting to be untruthful. Now, I don't mean just bold-faced lies or white lies. I'm actually talking about something else. I mean half-truths, or the kinds of unanswered questions that we leave hanging out there. Let's use a classical example. Somebody asks you, "How are you?" And you respond, "I'm fine. Everything is going really well. I'm fine." It's pretty rare for people to say, if you say, "How are you?" They're like, "Actually, it's not great. I hate my mother. My marriage is a fabrication, and my teenage son is a weed-addicted malcontent." Nah, most people stick with "I'm fine." In fact, the other day I had Zoom, schmoom, phone calls, all this nonsense, and I had a phone meeting with someone, and I had been having a very, very difficult day that day. And interestingly, the person on the other side of the phone, which was polite, they asked me how I was doing. And I gave them the professional, "I'm okay. Thank you for asking. How are you?" I don't think you needed any more information. And the person pushed it a little and said, "Oh, come on now. Are you just okay?" I'm like, "Oh, girl, it took a lot to pull the okay out of me." And so we get that pressure, right, to give the good answer. And it's just a reminder of how often, though, we often have to tamp down on what the real answer is to that question of, "How are you?" Now, this is even much more complicated when we are experiencing narcissistic abuse. The majority of people who have endured high conflict, antagonistic, difficult, toxic relationships have often gone years, decades, and lifetimes knowing that something wasn't right, but they weren't clear on what it was that wasn't right. As survivors, you know this well. You probably blamed yourself for what was happening for years. "Oh, maybe I'm not clear enough," or "maybe I am losing my memory," right? And when people asked you how you were doing, you might have actually been too confused to answer that question clearly. Confusion's a classical element of narcissistic abuse. So you may have given a very trauma-bonded, "Everything's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine." Now, the struggle is this. Most people don't want to hear your honest answer. Even those very close to you. Obviously, you're not going to tell maybe your personal issues in a professional setting, but even your closest people may not want to hear an honest answer. They don't want to hear that the only reason that your marriage is even together and is on life support is because you regularly manage expectations and have fully disengaged from your marriage, and you've accepted it will never change or get better, but you're not ready to get a divorce because you've got kids or money issues or whatever. Or that you finally recognize that your mother is never going to change and will forever remain toxic. And so you show up when you have to see her with a list of topics that are neutral, that are listed on your phone. So at this point, all you can talk with her about is the weather, and you never, ever really share what's going on in your life. When people talk about narcissistic abuse or narcissistic partners or parents or friends or coworkers, and you say that "I now know they're never going to change," it's really unsettling for other people to hear that. It's like you're kind of popping their balloon. They're sort of ideal that families are all supposed to get along and marriages last forever. Or maybe you inadvertently are forcing them to take a hard look at their own situations. And that can be unsettling and sobering, and a lot of people don't want that wake-up call. The other big issue is that if you do share your toxic relationship story, people around you are going to want to try to fix it for you. Well, no, I hear that it's bad, but can't you just try talking to him? How about if you guys start couples therapy? Or they'll say something like, "Oh, she's your mom. She always seemed kind of nice. She wants what's good for you. You know, your parents are getting older. You better talk to them or you're going to regret it." Or you hear things like, "Now, come on, all marriages are hard. Sometimes my husband falls asleep when we watch TV. I know exactly how you feel." Really? It's all too invalidating, too gaslighty, and too naive when you really try to share these stories of narcissistic abuse with other people. So what happens? Smartly, you don't share. But that is exhausting, to carry this confusing burden, carrying this weight, and not having a safe space in which to share it. That is the struggle that most people living with narcissistic abuse and really difficult relationships struggle with most. Where do you take this? Most people out there, if you were to actually share your story with them, would try to give you these Pollyanna solutions that do so much more harm than good. Most other people don't get it. And then there is also tremendous shame that can accompany being in these situations, being in this kind of marriage, or having this kind of parent, or having a difficult adult child that you feel disconnected from. This is one of the things I struggle most with doing what I do, that people don't have anywhere to turn with any of this. Actually, you know, some of you may know that the work of my heart now is actually trying to develop training programs for therapists so they're better equipped to work with survivors of narcissistic abuse and not gaslight them or try to give them sort of simple kinds of one-size-fits-all guidance, as well as I'm trying to construct programs that help people with narcissistic abuse survivorship. But that's not the same as a place where you can really share your own individual story. There are some online, groups that are, moderated of survivors, and I know many people are helped by those. I do. And therapy is very expensive. Very few therapists work in this area, and most people in the world do not have adequate access to therapy or the resources to pay for the level of care that they would need. So guess what ends up happening? You don't talk about it. And to not talk about it and to hold it in is not good for your health. It takes all kinds of different tolls on you. Fatigue, exhaustion, not getting pleasure out of your life, or things that you loved doing once. You just don't get those pleasures anymore. Everything kind of feels flat. You feel helpless, powerless, isolated. You will be sitting on a Zoom call, or maybe, for example, or maybe you'll be sitting with other people who are talking about their lives, but you often feel quite isolated in those times because you really can't share what's going on in your life for real because it feels like no one would get it. And that just adds not only to your isolation, but your confusion and your exhaustion. Now, interestingly, if something else had happened to you, for example, if you had a family member who was sick or somebody close to you had died, you would actually feel more comfortable sharing that than to open up about the toxic relationship or relationships in which you find yourself. And because narcissistic abuse is still an area about which our understanding is evolving, the majority of people just do not get it. Now, I can share this firsthand, countless times. And listen, I'm a shrink, so lots of the people I know, who I'm friends with or know as colleagues, are in mental health, okay? When I felt a little courageous, I might have shared a little bit about some of the episodes of narcissistic abuse in my life. And what I got back were the usual sorts of gaslighty statements about, oh, come on, Ramani, it can't be that bad. Or even worse, I would get these kind of uncomfortable looks like when I really spoke my truth. It was almost like they were wincing when I did share some of the toxic dynamics that were honestly cutting through my life. These people listening to me actually would have been less uncomfortable if I had shared some sort of detailed or lurid account of something inappropriate or something sexual, rather than sharing toxic relational dynamics. And when I said I recognize, oh, this person's never going to change and I do need to really manage my expectations, I would see even more discomfort on their face. I was popping their balloon. It's not your job to make other people comfortable with your pain, but it is your job to protect yourself and also to take care of yourself. It means you need to know your audience, and not everyone is equipped to listen to your story safely. I hope you can find some place to share your story, to feel heard, to have someone bear witness and hold space for you and not gaslight you. These narcissistic relationships are exhausting enough. The magnification of the exhaustion by having no one to bear witness to your pain in an honest, open way is almost unbearable. Carrying this pain inside of you is just not exhausting. It's really bad for your health. And maybe the best I can offer you here is a reality check. Your fatigue, your exhaustion is real. This isn't about going to sleep earlier. This is about people supporting you and at least telling you reality is valid, so that you can at least have some of that burden lightened. You can go to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening. So this is not something you're going to sleep off. You need someone to hold a safe space for you. A lot of people can't do that for you, and that really can be exhausting. Those of you who are survivors or living with narcissistic abuse understand that many people are going through this. It's actually part of this whole process. I wish it wasn't. Again, I wish you luck. Thanks again, and if you're not already a subscriber, please join us on this channel. Hit that subscribe button. We have content coming out just about every day. Thanks.